Imagine a man who stood 6'2" in an era of giants, riding a massive white stallion through the lawless Indian territory of the 1870s. He carried two Colt .45 revolvers, handles facing forward for a lightning-fast cross-draw, and a Winchester rifle he could fire with surgical precision. Over his 32-year career, he arrested more than 3,000 outlaws, killed 14 in self-defense, and was never once wounded. But here is the most shocking part. He began his life as a slave, escaped into the wilderness, and became the first Black U.S. Deputy Marshal west of the Mississippi. This is not a tall tale. This is the recorded history of the man who out-hustled the Wild West. Chapter 1. The Chains of the Cotton Field. The sun over Texas was a physical weight, a hammer of heat that forged men into steel or broke them into dust. Bass was born into the latter category, or so his masters thought. Born in Crawford County, Arkansas, he was property before he was a person. Young Bass was observant. While other boys played, he watched the way the wind moved through the tall grass and the way the colonel handled his firearms. He learned the language of the lead before he learned to read a single letter of the English alphabet. When the Civil War broke out, his master, George Reeves, took Bass to the front lines as a body servant. But history changed during a game of cards. A dispute over a hand led to Bass striking George, an act that meant certain death for a slave. Under the cover of a moonless night, Bass fled into the most dangerous place on the continent, the Indian Territory, modern-day Oklahoma. Chapter 2. The Red Man's Discipline. For years, Bass lived among the Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole nations. This is where the history textbooks usually skip the details, but this is where the legend was sharpened. Bass didn't just hide, he adapted. He learned the nuances of 5 different indigenous languages. He learned to track a horse by the way a single blade of grass was bent, and how to survive on nothing but parched corn and grit. Most importantly, he perfected his marksmanship. By the time the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, Bass Reeves wasn't just a free man, he was a ghost of the plains, a master of a land where the U.S. government had no eyes. Chapter 3. The Badge and the Bible. In 1875, hanging Judge Isaac Parker was appointed to the Western District of Arkansas. The territory was a cesspool of murderers, horse thieves, and whiskey runners. Parker needed 200 deputies who were brave enough to go into the land of the dead and bring back the monsters. James Fagan, the U.S. Marshal, knew only one man who could navigate the tribal lands and outshoot any outlaw. He pinned a silver star on Bass Reeves' chest. Bass was illiterate. He couldn't read the warrants he carried. Every morning he would have someone read the names of the fugitives to him. He would memorize the sounds of the names and the crimes associated with them. He never brought back the wrong man. Chapter 4. The Master of Disguise. What made Bass truly extraordinary to a modern audience was his wit. He was a pioneer of undercover work. Once, looking for 2 notorious brothers, he dressed as a tattered tramp, wore an old pair of shoes with the soles cut out, and walked 28 miles to their mother's house. He pretended the law was chasing him. The mother took him in, fed him, and when the outlaws arrived, they felt so safe they fell asleep. Bass handcuffed them both in their beds without firing a single shot. Chapter 5. The Ultimate Sacrifice. The most heartbreaking and real part of Bass's story occurred when a warrant was issued for a murderer in the territory. The name on the paper? Benny Reeves, his own son. Other marshals offered to take the warrant to spare Bass the pain. Bass refused. "The law is the law," he said. He tracked his own son, arrested him, and turned him over to the court. Benny served 11 years in Leavenworth. It was the ultimate testament to the man's unshakable moral compass.
Chapter 6. The Ghost of the Washita. The year was 1884, and the air in the Indian Territory tasted of dry pine and impending blood. Bass Reeves sat atop his gray stallion, a beast as tireless as its rider. In his saddlebag lay a stack of warrants, parchment that most men in these parts used for kindling, but which Bass treated as holy scripture. Among those papers was a name that made even the bravest marshals in Fort Smith develop a sudden fever: Jim Webb. Webb was a foreman at the Washington McClish Ranch, a man who had killed an innocent neighbor over a grazing dispute and then retreated into the labyrinth of the brush, surrounded by a private army of loyal, well-armed cowhands. Bass didn't ride in with a posse. He rode in with a single scout, a man named Floyd Wilson. As they approached the ranch, the tension was a physical cord stretched tight across the horizon. Suddenly, the crack of a Winchester shattered the silence. A puff of smoke rose from a ridge 300 yards away. Bass didn't flinch. He simply calculated the trajectory. "Stay back, Floyd," Bass rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "This man's debt is to the government, and I'm the collector." What followed was a tactical masterclass. Webb, thinking he had the advantage of height, fired again. The bullet grazed the brim of Bass's hat. Most men would have dived for cover. Bass, however, spurred his horse forward. He understood the psychology of the outlaw. They expected fear. When you gave them relentless forward motion instead, their aim faltered. Bass leapt from his horse while it was still at a gallop, rolling into the tall blue-stem grass. Webb lost sight of him. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the wind. Then, from a position Webb never expected, Bass emerged. "Jim Webb," Bass shouted, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "I have a warrant for your soul. Drop the rifle or meet your maker." Webb spun, firing wildly. Bass raised his Winchester. One shot. The outlaw's rifle was shattered in his hands. A second shot. The Webb's revolver flew from his belt. The third shot pierced Webb's chest. As Webb lay dying in the red dirt, he looked up at the towering black man standing over him. He unbuckled his own gun belt, a beautiful silver-studded piece of leather, and handed it to Bass. "I thought I was the fastest," Webb whispered, coughing blood. "Take this. You're the only man alive fit to wear it." Bass took the belt, but he didn't smile. He knelt, pulled a small Bible from his coat, and read a prayer over the man he had just killed. He took no pleasure in the death, only in the restoration of the balance. Chapter 7. The Trial of the Lawman. But the life of a black marshal in a post-Reconstruction America was a tightrope walk over a pit of vipers. In 1887, the very system Bass served turned its fangs on him. Bass was accused of murdering his camp cook, a man named William Leach. The charge was first-degree murder. To his enemies, the white supremacists who hated seeing a black man with a badge, and the outlaws who wanted him dead, this was the moment they had waited for. Bass was stripped of his badge. He went from the hunter to the hunted, locked in a cell in the very jail where he had delivered thousands of prisoners. The irony was a bitter pill. For months he sat in the dark, listening to the taunts of men he had arrested. "Where's your star now, Bass?" they'd jeer. "The rope is waiting for you." The trial was a sensation. It was held in the court of Judge Isaac Parker, the hanging judge himself. Parker was a hard man, but he was a fair one. He watched as witness after witness tried to smear Bass's reputation. But then Bass took the stand. He didn't beg. He spoke with the quiet dignity of a man who had stared down death in every creek and canyon of the territory. He explained that the shooting was a tragic accident, a discharge of a firearm while cleaning it in camp. He showed the jury his hands, calloused, scarred, yet steady. The jury, composed mostly of white men in a deeply segregated era, deliberated for hours. When they returned, the verdict was not guilty. Bass walked out of that courtroom, went straight to the Marshal's office, and asked for his badge back. He had 20 more years of work to do. Chapter 8. The Queen of the Outlaws. No story of the American West is complete without Belle Starr, the bandit queen. She was sophisticated, dangerous, and ran a criminal empire from her stronghold at Younger's Bend. Many marshals were terrified of Belle, not just because of her gun, but because of her political connections. But Bass Reeves didn't care about politics. When a warrant was issued for her horse theft ring, Bass rode straight into her camp. Legend says Belle Starr saw him coming and told her men to stand down. "That's Bass Reeves," she reportedly said. "If you shoot and miss, you're dead. If you shoot and hit, his ghost will still come back to handcuff you." She surrendered to him personally, allegedly charmed by his manners. Bass treated her with the same formal respect he gave a school teacher, escorting her to Fort Smith without a single hand being laid upon her. It was this combination of lethal skill and unshakable chivalry that made him a folk hero among the very people he arrested. Chapter 9. The Irony of the Lone Ranger. As the 1890s bled into the 1900s, the Wild West was being tamed by the railroad and the telegraph. Bass was getting older, his hair turning the color of the Oklahoma dust. Yet his reputation had grown to mythic proportions. He started wearing a disguise more often. He would dress as a farmer, a cowboy, or even a preacher to get close to his targets. He often rode a lead gray or white horse. He was known for handing out silver keepsakes, not silver bullets, but small tokens of his presence. Historians today point to these facts as the origin of the Lone Ranger. The radio show and later the TV series featured a masked man on a white horse who left silver bullets and had a Native American companion, similar to Bass's many indigenous scouts. But in the 1930s, a black hero wouldn't sell to a national audience, so the legend was whitewashed. Bass Reeves didn't care about the credit. He cared about the 3,000 warrants he had served. He cared about the fact that in 32 years he had never been hit by an outlaw's bullet, though his hat and coat were riddled with holes. The final stand, the Muskogee years. In 1907, Oklahoma became a state. With statehood came Jim Crow laws. The federal marshal system was dismantled in favor of local police forces. Bass, now almost 70, was told he was too old and the wrong color to be a state official. But the city of Muskogee knew better. They hired him as a simple patrolman. For 2 years, the greatest lawman in American history walked a beat on the city streets. During his time on the force, it was reported that not a single crime was committed on his beat. The mere sight of the old man with the twin Colts and the piercing eyes was enough to keep the peace. Bass Reeves died in 1910 of Bright's disease. His funeral was attended by hundreds, black, white, and indigenous. They buried him in an unmarked grave to prevent outlaws from desecrating his body. To this day, the exact location of his resting place is a secret kept by the earth he spent his life protecting.